Imagine standing on the edge of destruction. How does it feel to realize that the person you love, the relationship you've dedicated years to, could break apart in an instant? A seemingly simple dinner invitation, but what I discovered behind a closed door ensured that my life would never be the same again. This story begins with the harsh truth of betrayal, and my response to it shows just how fragile love can be. When trust is lost, what remains? Before I dive into my story, if you don't want your life turned upside down like mine, subscribe to my channel for real lessons from true stories we share every day, just like mine. Also, share your thoughts about the shocking truths I've experienced in the comments, and please support the channel by liking this video. Now that you've subscribed, let's jump into my story. That evening started like any other. My wife, Sarah, had told me she was helping a close friend at the opening of their new restaurant. She loved events like these, organizing, striving to perfect every detail. She told me to come a bit later, once everything was ready, so we could enjoy it together. I had no reason to doubt her. After all, I trusted her for years and never questioned these things. When I arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was lively. Vibrant music, laughter, a warm ambience. Yet deep inside, there was an unsettling feeling, an inexplicable discomfort. I looked around for Sarah, but I didn't see her greeting guests at the entrance or chatting with friends. Amid this oddity, a stranger approached me. "Michael," he said quietly, "you need to check the private dining room." With those words, the unease inside me turned to dread. Countless scenarios raced through my mind. I made my way through the crowd toward the room. The closer I got to the door, the faster my heart raced, my palms sweating. When I opened it, the sight before me pierced my heart like a knife. There was Sarah, my wife, with another man. The moment our eyes met, they both leapt apart as if struck by lightning. The guilt and shock on their faces dragged me into a dark void. I couldn't speak, couldn't react. I simply turned and walked out of the restaurant. It's hard to describe the shock of that moment. You never expect something like this to happen to you. Maybe you think you'd make a scene, shout in front of everyone, but I couldn't. My emotions were frozen. My mind kept asking one question. How did this happen? Why? And most importantly, what was I going to do now? When Sarah came home that night, her face was pale, but even looking her in the eyes felt unbearable. "Michael, we need to talk," she said. But instead of responding, I turned my back to her. The panic in her eyes showed, perhaps for the first time, that she was truly afraid of losing something. But that night, we had nothing to discuss. Words seemed meaningless, and my emotions were overwhelming. The next morning, Sarah tried to talk again. This time I listened, but inside I was boiling with anger. She spoke about her love for me, her mistake, and her desire to make things right. But her words never reached me. Sitting at the same table with her, I felt as though I was talking to a stranger, miles away. "Is this what you call love, Sarah?" I asked, my voice cold. "If this is your idea of love, I don't want it." When her tears started to fall, I felt a brief flicker of pity, but it quickly faded. There was no fixing this. That much was clear. After that conversation, nothing was the same. For days, our home, once a place of peace, became a suffocating prison. Being under the same roof with Sarah constantly brought back the images of that night. The scene in the private dining room replayed endlessly in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop it. I was drowning inside, yet a scream echoed within me. Still, Sarah kept trying to convince me to talk. "We can work through this," she said. "We can fix everything." But in my mind, I kept asking, do you want to fix this or just erase your mistakes? Everyone makes mistakes. I understood that, but the real question remained. Was this a mere mistake, or had it been a deliberate choice? One evening, as I sat in the living room, my gaze fell on the pictures on the walls, smiling faces, joyful moments. But now, they all seemed like falsehoods. Was the person I thought had been by my side all these years truly with me? Or had she been living in some other reality? I picked up a photo from our first vacation together. Sarah's joyful expression in that moment reminded me of how genuine and sincere everything had been back then. But now, even that image felt hollow. It became clear to me that trying to salvage this relationship was like attempting to piece together a shattered mirror. Even if all the fragments fit back together, the cracks would still remain. Sarah's attempts at reconciliation continued day after day. I could see her remorse, but her sorrow didn't move me. If anything, seeing her pain seemed to lessen my own. Was that selfish? Perhaps. But in the aftermath of betrayal, selfishness and anger often find their place. One morning, while we sat at the kitchen table for breakfast, Sarah faced me. Her eyes were swollen, and she struggled to find the right words. "Michael," she finally said, "I don't want to lose you." Those words froze the room for a moment. A flicker of something stirred inside me. Did she truly not want to lose me, or was this just the guilt speaking? For a brief instant, I entertained the thought of forgiving her, of trusting her once more. But then reality struck. How could I ever forget that betrayal? "Sarah," I said, my voice steady but resolute, "it's not that simple." She lowered her head, gripping the table as if to steady herself. "I made a mistake, but my love for you is real," she said. Her tears sparked a fleeting moment of compassion in me, but it quickly faded. That flame had already been extinguished. In the days that followed, everything changed. Our home, once a place of comfort, became a suffocating prison. Living under the same roof, as Sarah only brought back the haunting images of that night. The scene in the private dining room played over and over in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't erase it. I was drowning in the pain, and yet, inside, a voice screamed in agony. Sarah kept pleading with me to talk, to work things out. "We can fix this," she said. "We can make it right." But in my mind, I kept asking, "Do you want to fix this? Or do you just want to erase your mistakes?" Everyone makes mistakes, but not all mistakes can be undone. I knew that, but this wasn't just a mistake. It was a rupture. And now, it was time for me to decide what I was going to do with this. Was I going to let it control my life, or would I take charge of my future? One morning, I woke up with clarity. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't about forgiving Sarah or not forgiving her. It was about the value of this relationship to me and whether I could bear the weight of its shattered pieces. With those thoughts in mind, I got up, made coffee, and resolved to end this chapter once and for all. As I waited for Sarah in the kitchen, memories from the years we shared flooded my mind, from our first date to our wedding day. Each moment played like a reel of film. But no matter how beautiful those memories were, they were overshadowed by the scar left by her betrayal. My heart was broken, and no amount of effort could repair it. When Sarah finally walked into the kitchen, she watched me silently. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that this was the moment everything would change. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I know what you're thinking, but please give us another chance." Her words made me pause, but only for a moment. There was regret in her eyes, but I couldn't decide if it was enough to change my mind. I took a deep breath. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm yet unwavering, "I don't believe you. This isn't just about your mistake. This is an earthquake that shattered our relationship, and I can't keep living in the rubble." In that moment, Sarah completely broke down. She sobbed, gasping for air between her words. "I love you," she cried. "I really do. I don't know what I was thinking, but that doesn't mean I don't love you." There was a long silence. I never took my eyes off hers. Finally, I spoke. "Love isn't enough, Sarah. Without trust, love means nothing, and that trust will never return." That day marked the end of our marriage. Sarah packed her things and moved out. Within days, the house that once felt like home now felt empty. And even though the emptiness was overwhelming, it was a peace I hadn't known in a long time. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth. Neither of us wanted to fight or drag things out. We divided our assets quickly, and Sarah moved to Denver while I stayed in our home in Portland. But this house, once filled with memories, no longer felt like a home. It was merely a shell, haunted by the past. The first few weeks were unbearable. Late at night, I tried to block out the memories, but they kept replaying. The door I opened, Sarah's guilty expression, the suffocating silence in my chest. Yet, over time, the pain began to subside. The days became easier than the nights. I threw myself into work, spending more time with friends. I had to rebuild myself. And with each passing day, things got just a little bit better. If I learned anything during this time, it was a healing power time. As for Sarah, I had no idea where she was or what she was doing. And honestly, I didn't care. Her life was no longer my concern. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I couldn't change the past, but I could rebuild my future. In the end, betrayal may be one of the most devastating things a person can experience, but how we choose to let it define us is up to us. My confidence is returning, and I grow stronger with each passing day. Life goes on, and so will I.